All right, so we have another pretty large topic here, okay? We're talking about intergender anger, okay? And essentially what I'm proposing here is that there is lots of energetic reasons that we are denying that have masculine energy projecting anger at femininity. And we have feminine energy or femininity projecting anger at masculinity or the masculine. And there's so much of this, right? And it happens on both sides. And some of it is exactly the same, and some of it is different, right? There's corresponding injuries, right? And in some situations, there's a sort of corresponding opposite or sympathetic injury, and in some cases, there's actually just the same injury, just presented in a slightly different way. Okay, so if you're watching this video, and I'm talking about some of these concepts, you may not feel like they pertain to you at all. You may say to yourself, like, hey, I'm a guy, and I love women. Women are great, and you may be going over your head like, all the wonderful interactions that you have with women and all of this and that and how good women treat you, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have anger at women. And same with women. If you are sitting there watching this video and saying to yourself, men are great. I recognize some of the principles he's highlighting, yeah, but I personally don't have anger at men. I actually feel this is denial, okay? So, and I say this because as I've been working through this emotional progression that I will continue to highlight as I look to grow and love and develop my own relationship with the Creator, I'm learning that there are just layers upon layers upon layers of error. And as you start to uncover the emotional layers, right? Like all this is layers, and then there's more under this, and then there's more under the next one, right? So it's all about keep going in the progression as deep as you want to go. So if you're, on the surface, you think if you're a guy and you think you're cool with women, you may have a disincentive to not try this. But this is where the experimentation comes in, right? If you really don't have any of this stuff inside of you, then you won't have any trouble being humble, and you can play around with some of this stuff emotionally and see if it works for you, okay? If you don't have the anger inside of you, then nothing will happen, right? If you do have the anger inside of you and you experiment with this stuff and it shows that you do, you can be like, oh, okay, I thought I didn't have anger inside of me, but turns out I did. I wonder what other aspects of myself do I think I'm in harmony with love, but I'm actually not. Okay, so let's go through this, and I feel that the best way to go through it is to go through bullet point by bullet point for each type of gender-based anger projection, and talk maybe a little bit about why that is and what we can do to change that, okay? So our first column here is representing masculine anger-based projections at the feminine, okay? So what I mean is that from this column, from the masculine perspective, it's the woman's fault, or it's the feminine's fault, okay? And from this column, I'm talking about the feminine projecting anger at the masculine, okay? So from this column's perspective, this is the masculine's fault, okay? So this is how someone who is in masculine error is receiving and projecting anger at the feminine, and this is how someone who is in feminine error is receiving and projecting at the masculine, okay? All right, so first up, gender role projections. Gender role projections. We have a match. Okay. Right now, there's 50 million more men in China than there are women. 50 million more. Now, why is that? And what does that have to do with this? Well, China had instituted a one-child policy where each couple was allowed to have one child. They did this to combat overpopulation, I guess. And what ended up happening on a mass scale was that in the Chinese society, most people viewed the male as being more valuable to the family than a female. So that led to lots of female children being aborted and lots of couples choosing to raise their one child as the male, regardless of if there's a female that the woman is pregnant with, they get aborted and they try again. Okay? That shows major gender role projections, right? Now, that's China. It happens here too, okay? Everyone's got their views on boys versus girls. I mean, you think about it. Even like these gender reveal parties have gotten so ridiculous in their arrogance, right? And you've got people like revealing the gender of their child like it's like literally that child is like some sort of savior or something like that. I know that my Earth parents both felt that men were superior to women in certain areas. Okay? And as a result, I inherited that. Okay? You see this all the time. I talked about this in a previous video, but the other day, there's people I know that announced that they were having a child, but didn't reveal the gender. And on the comments, you can see all this stuff, congratulations, congratulations, And some people were like, oh, I hope it's a boy. I hope it's a boy. Why? What's the difference? Because that person, who was a woman, by the way, believes that men are superior to women. Okay? Men have certain jobs. They're going to go out and earn a living. They're going to do the manual labor. They are going to deal with the outside world. They are going to protect me. What about the gender role projections of the feminine? How about women more emotionally in tune than men? Women are better caregivers. Women are more understanding. Women are less violent and less base than men are. Women are pretty. They're objects of our affection and desire. How about women need to be cared for? It's a harsh world out there, right? And women need to wrangle men to take care of them. And this female child is going to know how to wrangle her man. Okay, so you can see that just from the first bullet point here, when a couple creates a physical and spirit body that a human soul incarnates into, immediately they are heaping projections at the child, right? Projections and expectations about how they're going to live their life. You're a male, you're going to be big and strong. You're going to go out there and earn a living. You're going to protect women. You've got no responsibility with the family life because that's all the woman, right? The woman's going to clean the house and cook for you and raise the children. For me, it's kind of funny because, children literally grow up to become what the world is. And men like to disregard the role and responsibility of caretakers and stewards and teachers. I mean, you can put parents in there too, but parents really are stewards. Because our real parent is God. Our real parent is God. Okay? All right, how about the next one? Genital mutilation. Some people call it circumcision, okay? I know my genitals were mutilated. I actually did a video about this called genital mutilation, so feel free to check that out, okay? But, you know, I talked a lot about that in that video, so I'm not going to go too into depth here. But what I will highlight is that, guess what? Every young boy that is delivered into the physical world and then has their genitals mutilated, they remember that experience emotionally, okay? And no amount of intellectual justification. Well, it has to do with God's covenant with Abraham. Well, it has to do with Christianity. Well, it has to do with not getting penile cancer. Well, it has to do with curbing sexual desires, you know. Well, it has to do with, you know, I want the boy to look like his father. All that stuff, errors from the Creator's perspective. And not only is it error, but it creates knots of anger in the male at the mother. Because who hands the child over to have one of their first experiences in the physical world be that their genitals are mutilated? I really want to highlight this point, okay? Because from my understanding, this is like a big one. It is a big one. I can't talk about other parts of the world, okay? But in this American society, the genital mutilation of young boys contributes to a tremendous amount of suppressed rage from the male to the female. Why? Because as our emotions build up, okay? So essentially what's happening is we are not experiencing our grief at our mother treating us in a non-loving way, okay? Then for self-preservation purposes, we change the belief in our soul to believe that this is loving behavior, okay? Our soul does this for our benefit, for self-preservation purposes, okay? Then fear starts building up over the grief because we've changed our belief. Because as newborns, we know what's loving. It's everybody else that doesn't know what's loving, okay? We are in lockstep with the Creator when we're first born. Well, not quite, because we're absorbing the emotional injuries of our parents in the womb during the gestation process. But before we're incarnated, we're in lockstep with the Creator. So that means that every being, every young human is in a greater condition of love than any other parent. Now, this stuff builds up, right? And then it gets into addiction. Now, the male does not want to feel his fear about confronting the feminine, his mother, for this thing that they did to them. And as a result, they will they will meet emotional addictions to suppress their fear. And then the law of attraction will bring them events in an attempt to release their suppressed emotions, which we don't act like, okay? And then we end up taking out our anger on our partners or other women in our life that had nothing to do with our genitals being mutilated. Okay? I know that when I started observing my soulmate's treatment of her child, I mean, you want to talk about triggering. Way triggering. This is part of the reason why the soulmate relationship is the hardest one you'll ever have. Because I'm observing what she's doing to her son, and it's the same stuff that happened to me. And I wasn't even aware of it at the time, you know. I've only become aware of it because I've been doing this emotional work. So this is a big one. This creates major anger in women. And for all you mothers and prospective mothers out there, give a hard, spend some time thinking about this one, right? Like, does this really make sense? Do you really need to do this? Right? Now, why do women do this, right? Because they themselves have anger at men. Let's go to the next bullet point. Lack of a divine feminine. In Western culture, there is very little, if any, representation of the divine feminine in religious institutions, or culturally, really. In pretty much every Western religion, God is a man, and then a man by himself had a son. The God-man had sex with an earth woman and produced a son that is also God. That's what we're told. Okay? Where's the partner of the God, so-called God-man? I mean, this stuff falls flat. Okay? God is a masculine and feminine soul-based entity. Look around. There's male bodies and there's female bodies. That gives us a clue that the Creator has all of these characteristics inside of her, inside of him. Not having a role model for the divine feminine does a lot of damage to femininity in the Western world. It creates feelings of inferiority and subservience. That kind of behavior stifles and just destroys, in this case, a woman's passions, desires, and will to express herself in how she wants. Right? Like, remember, we talked about the imagination in other episodes. We need to use our head and heart combined to imagine what is not currently in existence, right? Because our intellect can only compare and contrast known quantities, okay? If you're a young female human and you've got no representation of what a sexual, perfect female would look like and operate like in this place, that's done on purpose. It's done on purpose to keep women from achieving their own potential and relying on men for spiritual development. Okay? So it's kind of like this, like, insistence of females relying on males, which is an error from the Creator's perspective, which creates anger, okay? Which then, when a woman is actually in charge of a young man's life, right, that she will mutilate his genitals, and that she will do all sorts of other things to stifle his masculinity, because oftentimes women are angry at the masculine for various reasons. Okay, let's go to the next one. Men, again, these are generalizations, okay? So I want you to understand where I'm coming from when I'm presenting this material, okay? They're deep, they're there. They're generalizations. Not everything applies to every single person. I'm trying to highlight principles that exist, okay? Our emotions are trapped inside of us and we don't even want to admit they're there. This is how we start to uncover it, okay? Men, generally speaking, are more subjugated to emotional violence from women. Whereas with women, it's the inverse. Women are more susceptible to physical violence, okay? They're both horrible. They're both non-loving. And from the Creator's perspective, both of these situations are even possible because of injuries in our soul-based layer. Okay? So, like, while I would agree that, let's say if a man enacts physical violence on a woman, that is potentially more damaging. But really, if a woman enacts emotional violence in against a man, she's got the same errors in her soul that are allowing her to project this energy. It's just she's not engaging in the physical world necessarily. It's not my place to say this is worse or that's worse. Okay? But the Creator views this all on a spectrum of non-loving behavior. And none of this is loving. Women will be very patient and, in some instances, break men. You see this in older relationships, right? You have a couple. The man's walking around thinking he's in charge, which of course is an error, because no one's really in charge. And the woman is allowing the man to act like he's in charge, meanwhile controlling every action he does, emotionally speaking. Okay? Neither of these are good. And by the way, just because I'm highlighting these in these columns, women are still capable of enacting physical violence on men, and men are plenty capable of enacting emotional violence on women. Okay? I'm not saying that stuff doesn't exist. Of course it exists. But this stuff is on the surface. It's obvious. All right, how about men feel that they have to take no responsibility for home life because it's the woman's job to raise the children, right? It's the woman's job to clean the house. It's the woman's job to keep everything in order. You know, I'm a man. When I come home, I want everything to be spotless. I want dinner to be ready, and I want the children to be quiet. It's a big time error. Big time error. Okay. I mean, like, first of all, if you are a man and all you do is work and then you want to come home to quiet children, why are you even having children? What's the point? You spend far more time away from your children than you do with them. It doesn't make any sense. Unless you don't actually want them. Which gets back to codependent emotional injuries, right? Maybe you're having the kids because your wife wants kids. Okay? How about women? Again, generally speaking, they don't want to take responsibility for government or business life. Live, laugh, love, right? It's easy to stay in your own suburban bubble if you've got some money to insulate you. You don't have to question your behavior. What about the snacks you're buying for your kids? Are you buying them Oreos? The cacao comes from slave labor in West Africa. Are you buying them chips that were fried in palm oil? That palm oil is playing a role in destroying the rainforest and the habitat of the orangutans and the great apes in Indonesia. Do you eat beef? It's one of the worst things you can do for the planet. I don't want to know. And like, you know, I personally have a lot of anger at like mommy blogs that like will act like they're taking like some controversial position on something, but really they're just not at all. They're not taking responsibility for the power of their soul. You know? Like the whole mommy blog thing is like, it's like a false reality of like, I'm doing things this way with my kids, so therefore it's the best way. It's a failure to recognize that your children are actually your law of attraction based upon your emotional state. And everything about this place is designed to get you to feel your emotions out. And then your children no longer absorb your errors. All right, this leads to sexual anger. I've talked about this before with sexual manipulation. Men, when they get married and their wives or partners start bearing children, they lose sexual desire for them. And you can make all sorts of arguments as to why that is, right? Well, their bodies change, and this and that, and the relationships change. Exactly. You weren't actually in a soul-based, loving relationship. You were in a codependent, addictive relationship. And you're still in a codependent, addictive relationship, and men will justify their philandering and their cheating as natural behavior. And then women who are raising the children will take on an air of superiority. They will allow the man to cheat, while at the same time holding contempt and resentment for that man. Sexual anger. If everything is related to our soul, then like after a woman gives birth, she would drop weight right away, get back to wherever she was before. Maybe even better, right? But we just keep wanting to address in the physical body. We don't want to address our soul and how our soul interplays with our physical body. And so the sexual anger leads to resentment, And resentment is just what? It's apathy or suppressed rage. So you end up getting in a relationship with somebody, and you go through all this life stuff, right? And at the end of the day, everything is about you working through these layers to feel out your causal grief from when your parents did not love you unconditionally, from when your parents shut down your intuition, from when your parents yelled at you and punished you for telling the truth. When your parents forced their belief systems about the spirituality of this place onto you, rather than teaching you the truth that God is a being, God is your real parent, God is masculine and feminine, soul-based, and God wants to love you. Is God's desire to love all of our children, okay? All right, so how to work through this stuff? Well, I'll say it real quick because we're running out of time here. But basically, wherever you are on this scale, allow yourself to feel some anger. If you engage the small things, and any time that you feel a disturbance, you release your anger, it's going to make you emotionally more aware of what's going on, right? So as I've been going through this process, okay, I've been coming to terms with the fact that, I've got like a lot more anger in me than I realized. And that's okay, because I'm admitting it, and now I'm essentially working backwards, where there's all these suppressed memories coming at me, and I can feel it out based upon what is available to me at the time. Okay? Your soul will only present to you what your soul wants to handle at any given time. Okay? And that makes sense, because if we tried to feel out all of our fear in one shot, we would probably die. That actually does happen to people. You can die from terror. Okay? All right, so in conclusion, there's some interesting things to think about here. Okay? There's a lot more going on underneath the surface between man and woman. Or man and man, or woman and woman. I mean, really, you can apply this to anything, right? I'm saying that regardless of the body that you're in, you're going to have some combination of masculinity and femininity inside of you, whether you're in a female body or a male body, okay? Be aware of this stuff, The small stuff matters, right? And then feel out your emotions, okay? There's plenty more to be said on this, and I may talk more about it in the future, but I think that's good for now, okay? Good luck, friends. Love and peace.